Hello everyone and welcome to the next chapter. This is going to be quite a short one, but it's a very important aspect of photography that we often disregard. And that is being prepared. We should be prepared for everything in life, but we're going to stick to photography now. This is being prepared. Enjoy. The first thing we're going to talk about in being prepared is timing. Now, so much in photography has to do with timing, from how long our shutter stays open to when we decide to depress the shutter. And we want to make sure when we do depress the shutter, we're capturing the exact moment that we want. Now, everyone knows that a moment is not called a moment for nothing. Moments come and go like the wind, in the blink of an eye. You could have a very interesting scene that lasts on for an hour, but the best image in that whole scene only lasts for a second or even less. So you want to be ready and your timing needs to be perfect so you make sure you get the best image out of that scene. Too many times photographers have missed out on the best image. Now that's what we're always after. We're not just after good images in a scene. We're after that award-winning image in a scene, the best image. And even if you're watching the same scene of Gelato Baboons playing all day, you'll probably find that in that day there were only one or two moments of really powerful images. So you've got to be prepared for that moment and not miss it, because trust me, it is the worst feeling in the world to only have that moment in your head and you've missed it on your camera because you weren't prepared. Now, a big part of being prepared is got to do with predicting what your subject's going to do. Now, we all know that certain destinations with certain subjects that we want to photograph are sometimes quite hard to get to and often quite expensive. One of your best tools for making sure that you're prepared for any situation and to make sure that you get the best photograph out of it is to do some research beforehand. It's as simple as going onto Google and typing in the place that you're going and doing a little bit of research. That way you can get as good an understanding as possible of the place you're going and the movements of your subject and its habits. And when you get into the moment, there is a chance that that information can help you predict what your subject's going to do. So do some homework before you go. Secondly, and probably more importantly, is use local advice. Quite often photographers are too proud to ask for help. But even these days, if I go to a destination with a client and I haven't been there before, I will get a hold of photographers that have, and I will ask their opinion, because their advice can mean the difference between you coming out with an award-winning image or coming out with just some good pictures. So use local guides where you can. Unfortunately, coming across intimate knowledge of how certain species react is actually quite difficult. If you live in America, you can't really develop very intimate knowledge about a leopard and its habits and why it does certain things and why it does other things, unless you spend a lot of time in Africa, which can be expensive, or you have to come do a course, which is an amazing experience. You should do that anyway. But the point is, it's going to be hard for you to really get to grips as to a leopard's habits and try to predict what it's going to do. But you can do some research beforehand and you can rely on local guides. And number one, you can be aware of your environment. The problem is, when we first see a leopard, or it might be the second time or the third time, it never gets boring. We often fire away at the scene, as if it might be our last leopard sighting of our life. And we fail to do one of the most important things in photography, which is assess the environment around you. By all means, take a few pictures, then lift your head and look around, because that leopard might be on its way to an award-winning photograph. Now, this has happened to me, and I know it's happened to many photographers out there, where you fail to look behind you, you fail to look around, and you fail to see the big picture. That leopard you're photographing might... Damn motorbikes. That leopard you're photographing might be going towards a river. And any photographer who's followed a leopard that goes towards a river or seen a leopard anywhere near a water source knows that there's some very powerful images at stake. You could get the leopard drinking at eye level with its eyes open, reflecting on the water, beautiful image. You could get the leopard jumping over the river, beautiful image. All the pictures my clients have gotten of this situation, whether it was a drinking leopard or lion or lion or a leopard or anything jumping over a river, these rare moments, we received because we predicted what was going to happen. We looked up a scene that was good and looked for a scene that could be great. And we rolled the dice, and sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes the leopard walks straight towards the river, then walks off and doesn't do anything. But when it does, you want to make sure you're in the right position. So assess the environment around you, and where you can, use local advice. Ask the guide. If you see a rocky outcrop behind you, you say, do you think that leopard's going to go up there? He says, yeah, I think it is. You look at the light, you look at the rocks, and you go, if it sits there, that's going to be an award-winning photograph, and you align yourself. Because sometimes that leopard will jump up, it'll stay on that rock for 2 seconds, and it'll jump down. You're busy racing through the bush like an idiot, trying to get into the right position, and it's gone. there we go, throw your cameras in the river, your career's over. No, it's not that severe, but you want to at the moment if you miss it. So predict and be ready. Now with portraiture, in terms of shooting human beings, with a camera, we can apply the same concepts. The human face is capable of a plethora of different expressions that all have different emotions, some of them less powerful, some of them more powerful. And we're always after the most powerful, whatever the feeling it might emit on us. And you might have a lot of time with a human subject. And like I said before, in that time, there's going to be moments where the eyes, the cheeks, the lines in the face, the mouth, the light, everything lines up perfectly. And I promise you right now, that moment will only be a matter of seconds, if you're lucky, sometimes less. So you've got to try and predict and be ready for that. Now, I must disclaim, if you have a human subject and you're just firing away, it will naturally annoy your subject, and your subject will battle to relax. And by far the best images you can get of a human subject is in the moments when they are completely relaxed. It is in the moments when your subject is comfortable and acting naturally. That's where the most powerful images lie. So the best advice I can give is connect with your subject, respect your subject. Your subject must know that you have acknowledged them and respect them and are not just there to take a picture. And once they relax, then you can be ready. You all of a sudden see them consider one of their colleagues and know they're about to talk. When they communicate with someone else, the face lights up with different expressions. That's your moment. Click, 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 and then be a part of their life again. Don't just fire away. You're not going to get the best image out of that scene. So predicting the best picture with a human subject is a little bit more difficult. You've got to work with your subject and be ready for those candid moments that are so magical to capture. And the same thing applies to landscape photography. Often people think a landscape's not moving. I don't need to be on time. But the same thing applies when your image is made up of picture planes that are light and shadows. You could be shooting the same landscape for the whole day. But when the light lands up perfectly, when the sun just creeps up over the horizon and sends starbursts over the landscape, that's not going to last for very long. So again, your timing needs to be impeccable. Make sure you're in the right place at the right time. Do research, use the various apps that can tell you where the sun is rising, and make sure you're in the right place, because that perfect image, the greatest image of the day, is not going to last very long at all. The last thing we're going to talk about, being prepared, is something that might seem obvious to you. It's obvious to me, and I've still messed it up. It's obvious to every professional photographer, and we all mess it up. Sometimes we're just lazy and we get it wrong. And this is making sure your camera is in a state of preparedness. I call it combat ready. Ready in the best state possible that might be able to photograph the scene that's coming your way. One of the most common examples of getting this wrong is when we're shooting the night sky the night before, and we're shooting the stars and we're getting lovely pictures. And then we go out on game drive in the morning, and we come across a scene straight away, which often happens. We think, we need to drive for a couple of hours before we see something. And all of a sudden, as you leave the gates of the lodge, there's a leopard attacking an impala. And you click and you left your settings on what you used to shoot the night sky. Your shutter stays open, and what happens? You have to wait 25 seconds before it closes again, and you're left with an overexposed pile of dog shit. And the same thing can happen more commonly when you're shooting in various parts of the day. Where you're shooting a relatively still elephant, you don't need a lot of shutter speed. You can go all the way down to 1/100th of a second. All of a sudden the sun's setting, you're on your way to camp, the light is beautiful, there's not much of it though, and right at the last moment of the day, there's a leopard walking across the road, and you start firing, and your shutter speed's too slow, and it's going click, 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 and you're left with a blurry, useless image. So what I'm trying to say is, with the changing light and with changing conditions, you can put your camera in a state of readiness that's going to do the best it can in any situation that might present itself with those light conditions. If there's lots of light and there's birds around, maybe there's a fish eagle on a branch, make sure that you've got enough to shoot a flying bird. If you're driving towards a sighting and your guide has told you that there's a leopard and cubs, chances are the cubs are going to be playing. Make sure you've got enough shutter speed to capture cubs playing. If the light is low, it's the end of the day. Make sure you've got enough shutter speed to capture anything that might be moving. You might be limited, but make sure you're right up at that limit and nothing below. If you're about to arrive at a village and you're going to be shooting tribesmen, understand what the best aperture is for shooting people, which is usually about 5-6, somewhere around there. And leave your camera there, because that number one moment of the day might be as you arrive and you step out the car and the award-winning picture is there, but you've left your camera on f2.8 because you're doing something else. and it could have been that much better if you'd had the right aperture. Most of the time, you're going to be able to predict what is going to happen in front of you through your own knowledge or asking a guide. And there are certainly favorable settings you can put your camera in to make sure you get the right picture in the right moment. So in-camera preparedness is so important, and it is probably one of the most common mistakes we make, is waiting for a scene to get to its apex, to get to the best it's going to be that whole day, and then deciding on our settings, when we could have gotten 90% of the way there before we even arrived. So that's being prepared. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope this made sense, and I'll see you for the next chapter.